national prayer service at the National Cathedral here in Washington has just concluded. As we listened to the sound of tolling bells, we heard the Reverend Billy Graham say, "This is a tragedy that could have torn this country apart. Instead, it has united us." He said if the terrorists wanted to tear this nation apart, it's worked the other way. He also talked about underneath the World Trade Center, which crumbled after the two airplanes crashed into the Twin Towers. He said underneath the debris is a foundation that is not destroyed. He said we too have a choice, whether to implode and disintegrate or to become stronger. President Bush, speaking toward the end of this service, "We are in the middle hour of our grief," he said. He talked of offering deepest sympathies to the children, the families of those who are missing, who are dead. He spoke words of comfort, but he also spoke words of firm resolve. He said, "This is a war that was started by others at a time unknown to us. It will end at an hour of our choosing." CNN's White House correspondent John King is listening and watching at the White House.
More than 100 people, when I counted 30 minutes ago, were lined up.
And I'm here now at the cathedral with the Reverend Franklin Graham. You were just saying to me, Reverend Graham,
these people showed up anyway,
that the American people really don't have a sense right now of what we are facing as a nation.
I don't think so. I think many people think that maybe this is closure. But in some ways, this is the beginning of a long struggle for our way of life. And I believe there is a war that is in front of us. And my father spoke of the hope. And we as a nation, we need that hope. And we talked of the hope as Christians that we have in faith in Jesus Christ, God's Son. And he spoke of that foundation which you mentioned, and the foundation that we have as a nation, which is there. And even though we have been attacked, our foundation needs to be on Almighty God. And we as a nation, we need to turn back to God and build on that foundation which was started by our forefathers many years ago. And of course, the President talked about ridding the world of evil. And one day I believe that will happen when God comes and when Jesus Christ, the Son of Almighty God, establishes his kingdom here on earth. We'll see evil removed. But till then, evil's going to be present with us, and it needs to be fought, and we need to oppose it, and we need to work for good in this world while we have that opportunity.
Your father spoke with remarkable energy. You were telling me he's 83 years old. He walks with a cane sometimes now. He walked slowly, but his words were vigorous, and they were strong. It struck me, Reverend Graham, he said at one point, we come together to affirm our conviction that God cares for us, whatever our ethnic, political, or religious background. He was speaking to everyone.
He was, and God does care for all of us, and he loves all of us. And that's what my father wanted to get across to the nation, that God is a God of love, and he's a caring God.
I mention that because this is a time when many of us might be tempted to look at those of Arab backgrounds from the Middle Eastern part of the world and just in a blanket sense turn against those people.
And we should do that. I have many Arab friends, many Muslim friends, wonderful people who, of course, are just as brokenhearted and disgusted over the incidents of this past week as we are. And we should not just turn our hatred toward people of another race or of another religion. We need to focus on those that are actually responsible for this. And it wasn't a race of people that did this. It was a small group of people who have been on the destruction of this country, these Islamic fundamentalists that need to be stopped. So I just plead with people not to paint in a broad brush, so to speak, the people of the Middle East. They're wonderful people.
Do you have any doubt, Reverend Graham, that we are headed for a war?
Yes, I believe so. I really do. And how long it will be, I don't know. But you're not going to be able to attack these terrorists and defeat them in 100 days. It's not going to be a Gulf War. This is going to take time.
You know, it's been said ever since Vietnam, and perhaps even before that, American have been reluctant to think of sending our young people off to the far corners of the earth to die for causes that Americans didn't necessarily understand or support. But I hear you saying this is different.
This is different. This is for the sake and security of this nation. And this may sound rough, Jude, but we need to use every weapon in our arsenal, if need be, to defeat this enemy. And I don't think we should hold back, and we'll make a great mistake if we hold back our technology and hold back our weapons and put young men and women in there and sacrifice them because we're scared to use some of our major weapons. And I think we're going to have to use every, and I hate to say it, hellish weapon in our inventory if need be to defeat these people.
Do you really believe that the American people are prepared now to have young Americans die?
No, but I think they're prepared to stop this, but not to put our young men needlessly, or our young women needlessly. And yes, there may be some young men and women whose lives may be lost, and I pray not. And that's why I think we need to use these weapons that we have, and not our young men and not our young women, and just sacrifice them as cannon fodder. But let's use the weapons we have, the weapons of mass destruction if need be, and destroy the enemy.
We're watching the front of the National Cathedral here in Washington. Prayer service called just yesterday by President Bush just concluded. We're seeing an extraordinary coming together of presidents, former President Clinton, former President Gore, whom, as I mentioned earlier, President Bush specifically asked to come to this service. Many of the people in the cathedral, members of Congress, members of the Bush administration, but also families suffering. We saw people clearly emotionally moved, having a hard time holding back their emotions, and we can only assume they are families of those who missing and dead at the Pentagon and perhaps in New York City.
And I think the president's message was probably one of the greatest speeches I have heard in recent times. Especially, I think it's the greatest message he's ever given a speech. And I think he touched the heart of America with his words. He reminded us of the stories and of the heroes, the real heroes, the people who have sacrificed their lives already to save others, the firemen, the priests, the men and women in uniform that died on their post. And I think this may be one of the great hours in our nation right now as we prepare to go forward to deal with this.
We're watching former President Clinton speak with the head of the Democratic Party, Terry McAuliffe. This is one of those moments when political parties, the differences between the two parties seem to fall away. Aaron Brown joining us now in New York. Aaron, it seemed to me that the president wanted to make a point of the character of Americans, and we're watching President Clinton, as we all are, affected emotionally by this. But President Bush said, "It is said that adversity introduces us to ourselves." He said that's true of a nation as well.
He said, he quoted a Franklin Delano Roosevelt line. He talked about the warm courage of national unity that we are basking in this difficult moment. I was struck, Judy, by the beauty of the cathedral, of the words, the music, in contrast to the utterly obscene look of the Pentagon and the World Trade Center. That contrast seems so powerful to us as we sit here in New York today.
It is, Aaron. And the sounds here in Washington too. I mean, we've listened over the last few days to the replaying of the screams of those as they watched the aftermath of those planes hitting the World Trade Center, the screams of those who couldn't believe what they were seeing. And today we hear voices lifted in song and in praise. And you're right, it is, the contrast could not be more stark.
And we also, as the service was beginning, we were quite moved by the services that were going on in other places, from quite literally Maine to California, all across the country, as Americans of all faiths gathered on this Friday, this memorable week, unforgettable week, gathered together and worshiped and cried and hoped for better days. One never knows how long these moments of national connection last, but while they are occurring, while they happen, and they almost always occur in the country's most difficult moments, they are quite moving. Former Senator, presidential candidate Bob Dole there.
Aaron, I really believe, and you know, I guess it's being said over and over, this country hasn't seen anything like this since World War II. We haven't had an occasion to come together with this sort of political and religious unity, ethnic unity, you know, all those words that Billy Graham spoke. Whatever our backgrounds, we join together as a country. And you think back to the challenges this nation has faced in the last half century, and I can't think of a time when the country has seemed more united than it seems right now, and will need to be as we face whatever lies ahead.
It certainly speaks to how strongly the events of Tuesday shook the nation, that those buildings could come down, that the Pentagon could be hit, that so many lives could be lost, that